los hombres unidos en la lucha antifascista.
Hey, my name is Nikolai. Welcome back to Red Star. Today we're going to be talking about how liberal democracy was designed to fail you. So we want to start off with a little bit of context. Obviously, democracy is something that it's an idea, a practice that long predates capitalism or liberalism. It's something that many ancient civilizations practiced to some degree or another. A lot of times we have this misconception that it's something that came about with liberalism or capitalism, etc. So we want to start off by talking about John Locke. John Locke, he's known as the father of liberalism. Locke is someone that argued that there are three inalienable rights. Those rights being the right to life, to liberty, and to property. When Locke talks about life, he argues that every person has a fundamental instinct and a duty to preserve their own existence. And then when he talks about liberty, he argues that this protects personal autonomy and freedom of choice. Liberals believe that without liberty, individuals cannot use reason to pursue their own goals or follow their conscience. And then lastly, when he talks about property, in his view, your own body and your labor are your own. When you mix your labor with the earth, like farming, like building, you acquire the right to the fruits of that labor. This gives people, in his view, the security to produce, trade, and improve their communities. Now, while Locke was certainly a very progressive individual for his time, even his beliefs did come with a lot of contradictions. While he claimed liberty as this inalienable right, he did continue to use and personally practice slavery. He benefited from the slave trade. He didn't really believe in democratic rights for everybody and was very intolerant to different religious views. Now, as the father of liberalism, Locke argued that the only people that should be able to be involved in the political process through like running or voting are people who meet property qualifications, arguing that they have the most tangibly at stake with the nation's success. Many philosophers who came after him did expand on his argument. People like James Madison, Alexis de Tocqueville, and John Mills Stewart argued that if everyone is granted the right to vote, then the landless majority would opt to redistribute the property of the land-owning minority, a term which ended up being coined the tyranny of the majority. Now, when it comes to revolution, restricting early political power to the ideologically educated is considered vital by most revolutionary architects because it protects a fragile, newly born system from self-destruction before it can take root. Now, when you're building a new system, obviously you want the people that are most educated in how that system works. They did rightfully worry about the threat of demagogues. They argued that uneducated citizens are easily swayed by charismatic leaders, like demagogues, who use fear and anger to gain power. They were worried that leaders could win votes by promising impossible or destructive policies that would harm the nation over time. They argued that an uneducated majority acts on sudden passions, leading to unstable and reactionary laws. They argued that decisions are made by peer pressure and crowd mentality rather than calm, logical debate. There was founders like James Madison who feared that a poor, uneducated majority would outvote the wealthy minority to cancel debts and seize property, and they believed that this would destroy the economy, commerce, and respect for contract laws. Then there was people like John Stuart Mill who warned that a dominant uneducated public opinion would force total conformity and it would silence unique, eccentric, or highly educated minority voices, halting the intellectual progress. Now let's take a look at their views of property of someone like John Locke. Now, I don't think that anyone disagrees that you should be entitled to the fruits of your own labor, but he and a lot of liberal thinkers that came after him did fail to distinguish between personal and private property. Personal property that's being used for personal consumption or use, while private property is property that generates profit or extracts value through the labor of others. When he claims absolute property was an inalienable right, it's exactly what gave way to the capitalists to unlimited accumulation. Now, is this some kind of Marxist revelation or some kind of Marxist input? No, actually, liberal philosophers who came after Locke, like Rousseau, argued exactly just that. John Stuart Mill criticized property rights over unearned resources, like landlords collecting money despite not providing anything, while liberal philosophers did begin to move away from Locke's argument of inalienable rights. The damage was largely already done. Now, while liberals might not frame property as an absolute natural right in philosophical debates, the institutional system itself, like the courts, common law, statutory enforcement, ensures that it continues to function as an immutable foundational right in practice. Now, let's take a look at how their early views, and more specifically Locke's views, on democracy and property influenced our political system that we have here at home. At its founding, America only guaranteed voting rights to land-owning white males, the exact idea that Locke had. Suffrage was then allowed to be decided by the states. Most states did begin to expand suffrage, again, to all white males in the 1800s, although it wasn't always through the goodness of their hearts. The Dorr Rebellion was one instance which saw Thomas Wilson Dorr mobilized a movement around expanding voting rights. And while the rebellion was squashed, a lot of the people involved were arrested, it did lead to Rhode Island passing legislation to expand voting rights. And to this day, we still see the Republican Party try to limit voting rights to the most downtrodden people in our society and continuing the liberal legacy of exclusion. In the Federalist number 10, James Madison did argue that the sheer size and diversity of the United States would make it difficult for a single overbearing majority to form and align on oppressive schemes. The constitutional framework divides authority across three independent branches to prevent legislature from easily consolidating absolute power over the minority. The creation of the House of Representatives, this reflects population size, but then there was the Senate, which grants exactly 2 seats to each state, regardless of population, giving smaller states disproportionate power. The biggest thing on this topic is the Electoral College. It was instituted exactly to insulate the presidency from pure popular vote, ensuring that candidates could not win by appealing only to high-density population centers. This is something that's come up time and time again in our elections. Across multiple elections in recent history, the popular vote did not win the presidency, and it did go to whoever got the most electoral credits. Lastly, there's the Bill of Rights. So there's specific constitutional amendments that are designed to restrict government's ability to infringe upon fundamental individual liberties, regardless of majority consensus. So there's the Fourth Amendment, there's the Fifth Amendment. These touch on topics of not being able to seize or search property without a warrant, but then also not being able to seize property without just compensation. And it didn't stop there. There were several rulings throughout America's history that have empowered corporations to become the dominant voice of our political system. And obviously, corporations are private property. So one of the biggest things, again, on this topic is going to be Citizens United versus the FEC. This was a landmark Supreme Court ruling that established that corporate and union spending on independent political campaigns is a form of protected speech under the First Amendment. And this allowed unlimited independent expenditures and created the era of super PACs. There was SpeechNow.org versus the FEC. This also happened in 2010. It was the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which applied the reasoning from Citizens United, and it ruled that organizations, including independent PACs, can accept unlimited donations from individuals and corporations. So while you are limited in how much you can support a political candidate, this does not apply to private property, corporations, etc., PACs, for instance. There was the First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti, where the Supreme Court recognized corporate free speech rights in ballot measure elections, and it was setting the stage for treating corporate entities as having First Amendment speech protection. Then there was the Federal Election Campaign Act and amendments. This legislation, combined with the subsequent Supreme Court decision in Buckley versus Vallejo, regulated and categorized campaign finance, setting the precedent that money spent on speech equates to political influence. Lastly, there was corporate personhood. There was long-standing judicial precedents established through cases like Santa Clara County versus the Southern Pacific Railroad, which established that corporations are entitled to the same legal rights as natural individuals under the 14th Amendment. What does this look like in practice? Democracy in America was not made to serve you. It's not made to represent you. None of these politicians are made to represent you. They do not have to listen to you whatsoever. There are numerous studies that show that the vast majority of political races, 91% of political races, are won by the top spender. The percentage of Americans that are for or against legislation have absolutely no impact on whether Congress will make it law. 66% of political fundraising comes from just 0.2% of Americans, and politicians are found to spend between 30% and 70% of their time fundraising. If they are looking to get reelected, who do you think they're going to go to? Are they going to go to the average person that's able to contribute $4, $14, $40? Or are they going to go to these super PACs and ask them what they want to see? Ask them what policies they should support to get their support. This very system is what ensures that our politicians are servants of capital and property, and not to people like me, you, and to the majority, to us. Now, before we go, we quickly want to talk about how socialism critiqued liberalism and improved upon it. Marxist thinkers and those that influenced them understood the importance of property to be used for the common good. Yet, they were able to differentiate between personal and private property, thus calling for the state control of private property. So we're talking about things like factories, housing, land. They understood the importance of democracy and everyone having a voice in their system, but also understood the importance of education to guide their actions and their votes. They came up with ideas like Lenin's idea of the vanguard, arguing that revolution should be led by the most educated on socialist theory. Instead of restricting their ability to vote, they prioritized education and utilized council democracy to ensure that the most educated and dedicated people rise to the top. And most importantly, Marxist theory argued for the gradual withering away of the state to the full empowerment of the masses. So when we argue that education needs to be at the forefront, that only educated people on our principles should be making decisions in the early process, that's not to say that this is how the system should be run overall. This is to say that education needs to be at the forefront of our struggle to ensure that a socialist revolution continues to thrive long after we're gone. If you like this video or you support our cause, we would appreciate if you check out the links down below. There's a link to our Instagram. That's where you can find us. That's where we're going to share whenever we have a new video coming out. And there's also a link to our Patreon. Now, Patreon is where we get most of our donations, which really help us out. We're a largely self-funded community center. So $1, $5, $10, $20 makes a huge difference for us. And if you were able to support us on there, we'd really appreciate it. We are hoping to come up with some Patreon exclusive content in the near future, so you can check us out on there. Thank you so much. While this video was being edited, it came to our attention that NonCompete also has a video on this topic with Michael Parenti. It's called The Dark Truth of America's Founding Fathers. We're going to link that video down below because I think it does a great job of talking about this exact subject, so I would recommend checking it out.